Morning, Courtney.
Good morning. Gail, I was told yesterday, I think you were on the email that Richard's gonna be here and he's gonna speak during the written and oral communications. Is that right? Is that
That's what I was told by Patricia
Okay.
as well.
okay? I will plan for that. My shutters
Okay.
are making a weird line. Can't fix that. Maybe I can fix that. Is that better?
Hey, Rick, how you doing? Gail.
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good.
Excellent.
Everyone enjoying a good summer. It's getting nice and warm.
It is, yeah, pretty toasty here. It's a little better weather than I had over in Germany. There was a lot of rain.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's nice. Summer rain is fabulous.
Yeah, it's kind of nice for a change.
Yeah. Courtney or Rick, are you guys going to be pulling up the drawings, or do you need us to pull them up, or?
So I believe media should be pulling up the PowerPoint, Courtney. How how does this typically work on your end?
Yeah, so I'll be starting the meeting. I'm the chair of the meeting, and we will have Rick give his presentation for item A, and then after that, we will give the applicant an opportunity. You have 15 minutes to give a presentation should you want to give a presentation. You're not required. And then we will open it up for ERB.
Okay. Hi, Marnie. How are you? Long time no see.
Courtney, Richard just let us know that he's not able to make it, but Sal is here for what we talked about.
Okay. Sounds good.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good
Morning.
morning.
And hi, Chris. I was muted.
Oh, okay. Yeah, hi.
Good to see you.
Good. And Jensen's on. He's the owner of the properties.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm just getting set up here. Okay. So I don't think we are waiting for anybody else because Barbara can't make it, right, Gail?
That's correct.
Okay, so I think we are, and then you guys are here, the app works here. I think we are all set. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I would like to call to order the Malibu Environmental Review Board meeting of July 24th, 2024. This meeting is being held by teleconference. Boards and city staff are participating from remote locations. Members of the public can participate in the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public wishing to speak during the meeting must click the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen to indicate a desire to speak after the item has been announced by the chair and must be present in the teleconference when called upon to be recognized. Once called upon, please lower your hand in the Zoom meeting. Board members, if you have comments to make during this meeting, please raise your hand using the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and I will call on you in turn so we can make our discussion clear for the record and for the public. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. We are going to move on to item number 1, written and oral communications from staff and the board, and I'm going to pass that on to Salvador Lopez.
Thanks, Courtney. I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. My name is Sal Lopez. I'm the interim assistant director here until they find somebody permanent. And I should be around for at least, I would say, 3 to 4 months, but we'll see how that happens. I wanted to make a quick announcement. I know that as a result of our last hearing, we didn't have time to place an item on the agenda. So what we're going to be placing on the next available agenda is an item for discussion to discuss about the roles and responsibilities of the ERB and how our recommendations are handled. So I just wanted to give that quick update that will be on the next available ERB agenda. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Salvador. I see that Richard is here. So Richard, did you want to say a few words? Or not?
No, thank you very much, Courtney. I just wanted to jump on real quick to thank the ERB members for their time and their dedication to this. I appreciate your help with us, completing this process that's included in the city's ordinances and helping us with your feedback so that we can get, better projects in front of the Planning Commission. And so I just wanted to take a moment to thank you very much and appreciate all that you guys have done with the group. And that is it. And farewell. And I wish everyone great success and good luck in the future. And I think you guys are in great hands with Sal. Sal has really been a great addition to the department. I wish he were permanent, but understand that he can't be, and really just appreciate his time. And the planners really like him, and I think you guys will learn to really enjoy working with him and value his experience as well.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank
Richard,
you.
yeah, you're going to be missed. It's been a long time. I think you and I have been out in Malibu over 20, 25 years. And so you'll be greatly missed, but good luck with your future endeavors. And thanks for all your help over the years. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. We will definitely miss you. All right, so we're gonna move on to item number 2, old business. Gail, I'm still seeing none. Is that the case?
That is the case.
Okay, perfect. We're going to move on to item number 3, new business. We are going to pass it over to contract planner Rick Caswell for CDP WF 21-007.
Thank you, Courtney. And good morning, Environmental Review Board members. My name is Rick Caswell. I'm a contract planner for the City of Malibu. And today we're discussing a proposed 2-story single-family residence and associated development at 3870 Puerto Canyon Road. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So quick look at the vicinity map here. So the subject property is a flag lot located on the east side of Puerto Canyon Road, just west of Pepperdine University. You can see the Escher there, and there's also steep slopes just to the north of the subject property there, the building pad, which is kind of asterisk there for you. So there was a previous home there that was destroyed by the 2018 Woolsey fire. You can somewhat see the outline of that home with the abandoned pool next to it there. So that just gives you a little bit of context for the subject property. So the proposed and existing development, including the required fuel modification, will result in impacts to the 100-foot buffer from stream and woodland Escher that exists on the property. If I could have the next slide, please. So a quick summary here of the proposed project. So the applicant is proposing a new almost 7,000 square foot 2-story single-family residence. It's 6,790 square feet, and that comes with an attached 685 square foot garage. A swimming pool and spa are proposed, along with on-site wastewater treatment system and associated development. So the variance for fuel modification and existing development encroachment into Escher, so that that's sort of a all-encompassing variance there for those encroachments, so that there is an existing retaining wall on the property at the backside of what was previously the old home that is being proposed to be retained by the applicant to ultimately continue development on that pad. Meanwhile, the fuel mod affects essentially the entire property there, and so because of that, the applicant is unable to avoid impacts to that Escher buffer. Additionally, a minor modification is being requested by the applicant. This is for setback reductions to both front and both side yards, given the limited building pad they have to develop upon. And then additionally, they're requesting a site plan review for construction above 18 feet, which would go up to 24 feet for a flat roof. And also for the, there is proposed development encroaching into steep slopes at the front there. That would be for the proposed pool, which essentially encroach within slopes up to 2.5 to 1 in steepness, between 3 to 1 and 2.5 to 1 in steepness. If I could have the next slide, please. So just looking at a quick overview here, this figure before us gives us somewhat of an overview of some of those buffers. So you can see the main dashed line here extending onto the development area, which is the orange sort of hashed outline there. So the stream buffer is 100 feet. You can see the blue stream there running through the north of the property, and you can see how that encroaches ever so slightly. That's about a 5-foot encroachment there across the retaining wall there at the north of that development area, shown in the hashed orange. You can see there's a number of protected trees, which I will get to in further detail in the slides here, which are outside of the development area there. Although there is existing development at the southwest corner there near tree 22, and that is an existing driveway which will remain undisturbed by the proposed development. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is sort of getting further into the tree aspect, the protected trees that we have on the property there. You can see that there's proposed tree protected fencing there in between the proposed developed area and the on-site protected trees. You will notice tree 41, there's also fencing which would go, protective construction fencing which would go around that. So all those trees, other than tree 22 and then tree 20, which is actually located on the adjacent property, 3868 Puerco, immediately to the west, which will be the next item that I will get to. So yeah, the proposed development does not impact the protected zones other than tree 22 and tree 20. And as I say, I will get to tree 20 in more detail, but tree 22 is proposed to remain on site. However, that existing encroachment with the driveway would remain. Next slide, please. This just provides us with an overview of the fuel modification zone. So we have zone A, which is between 0 and 30 feet. That's shown in yellow. Zone B between 30 and 100 feet in green, and then zone C 100 to 200 feet. So all of those zones will ultimately involve encroachment, but with the ESHA and ESHA buffer there. So it's unfortunately it's unavoidable, just given that there's proposed development. It's fire department requirements, but this just sets forth those different zones and how those are impacted. Next slide, please. So quick summary here of the proposed impacts. So as mentioned previously, the entire development area falls within the 100-foot buffer from woodland ESHA. There will be a little over 3,000 square feet of development, which includes the existing retaining wall at the north of the where the former residence was located, and that is proposed to be repaired by the applicant less than 50% of that entire structure, which is in keeping with CDP requirements. So that's also located within the 100-foot ESHA or stream ESHA buffer, while fuel modification zones A and B will impact little over 14,000, almost 15,000 square feet of woodland ESHA, as well as about 174 square feet of impacts to stream ESHA. Fuel modification zone C will impact about 8,000 square feet of woodland Escher and about 436 square feet of impacts to stream Escher. As mentioned before, no removal of protected trees is proposed. However, oak trees 22 and 26 will be encroached upon by existing retaining walls, and these are to be maintained and repaired by the proposed project. Just noting here, so a biological resources assessment, which included a native tree survey report, that did identify 23 native protected trees on or near the subject parcel. And as mentioned, 2 of those trees will be subject to encroachment from the existing development. So that's the driveway where there's a retaining wall relative to that. And then also the retaining wall at the north of the former residence there, which will be maintained and repaired. Encroachment of a native tree is defined in the LIP by the area within the drip line of the tree and extending at least 5 feet beyond the drip line or 15 feet from the trunk of the tree, whichever is greater. So the biological resources assessment noted the impacts to Escher as previously described, while the LIP has several applicable sections with regard to the affected Escher and protected trees, which I will get to with this next slide, please. So quick overview here, there are several sections applicable here. Section 4.7.1, so the allowable development area is limited to 10,000 square feet per the LIP, since all feasible building areas will result in impacts to Escher. So the applicant is proposing a 10,000 square foot development area, and so the proposed development is contained all within that area. Section 4.8.1 of the LIP states that all new development shall include mitigation for unavoidable impacts to Escher from new development, including required fuel mod and brush clearance. There are 3 mitigation options that are presented by the LIP that the applicant can provide in response to that, and that's habitat restoration, habitat conservation, and or an in lieu fee for habitat conservation. Section 5.5.1a, encroachment of protected trees does require a native tree replacement planning program, which was provided by the applicant and is part of that biological resources assessment document. Section 5.5.1b, so we have encroachment into protected zone of native trees. So if that results in a loss or worsened health of those trees, mitigation measures shall include planting of replacement trees at an on-site ratio of not less than 10 replacement trees for every 1 tree removed. Alternatively, in lieu fees or off-site planting can substitute for that. So that wraps up the report. Essentially, the ERB will be making recommendations for the Planning Commission, and this notably includes some of those mitigation strategies and which ones would be most applicable given the existing conditions of the subject property and, of course, what's feasible to the applicant. So I'll conclude my remarks there and open it up to feedback from the ERB.
Thanks so much, Rick. We're actually going to give the applicant a brief moment to present, should you want to. Jensen and or Chris, is there a desire to provide a brief presentation or comments, remarks? You're muted, Chris. Sorry.
Rick, do you mind pulling up the fuel modification plan?
Yes, give me 1 second. Well, actually, you know what, it'll be media. who will perform that duty on my behalf.
Oh, you can do it too. Is it in the staff presentation?
Yes, yes. So if you can go back to, let's see, it would be slide 6.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Salvador. I want to introduce myself, Christopher Sorensen, architect. So nice to meet you. And I've been working out in Malibu for over 27 years now. So you know, I lecture at sustainable architecture at UCLA. Just a little bit of background. We're LEED certified, so we're very sensitive to the environment. Obviously, as an architect, we're commissioned to design homes, and you know, in Malibu, some of these homes are reasonable in size. The one thing I want to note when you look at this, and Courtney, obviously, you're well aware of this too. The fuel mod, as Rick pointed out, these 30-foot, 100-foot, and 100 to 200-foot sections, as everyone knows, when you look at this map, it might give the indication that we're proposing to develop all those areas. I mean, obviously, we kept our development tight to the pad. We have almost over a full acre of land. I don't know if anyone's been to the site, but then the ravine drops down where the blue line stream is and goes back up the hill. So we've stretched the development out along that pad, the line, and most of it goes over the previous home's footprint. But the one thing in looking at this map, I want to just point out is we're not planning on developing even into there's no landscape proposed even into the zone A. We're pretty much keeping all of our development up at the top of the bluff, or I shouldn't say bluff, but the top of the pad, and then of course the land drops down. So that happens really tight along the back of the house. So we're bringing our house. We have a 5-foot walkway around the entire property. You see the dotted red line for fire prevention, and other than that, it's just natural. So obviously, it's required by fire and fire prevention to show this map as a fuel mod map, and that's one of the variances that we're required to ask for because it's encroaching into the the buffer zone. But the reality is we're not developing or proposing any landscape. We're keeping all that nature natural habitat. And again, just keeping our development up to the flat pad up above where all the other, the home adjacent is to the I guess that'd be to the east of us. And then of course there's homes in front of us and on the other side of Puerto, which are rather larger than ours. So I just wanted to make that point. But that is the required variance because of the strict requirements that LIP, the encroachment into that buffer were required for that particular variance. The other thing to note is if that previous house that burned down in the Woolsey fire were to go for permits today, they'd have to be asking for the same variance because that house would, it's basically very similar footprint where the bulk of our house is. And so that house would have had to ask for a variance in the current codes as well, just as a point. Jensen, was there anything else you wanted me to kind of touch upon regarding
No,
what was said?
I think that's good. Yeah. On my end, obviously, I'm going to leave it to you guys to discuss more, and I'm here to listen. But yeah, I think Chris has been very mindful of the impacts and kind of that's part of his architecture, what he does, and his sustainability. So I think it's all been taken into account quite well, and we've obviously the project's been pretty heavily scrutinized within the city. So hopefully we meet everything that's required. And but yeah, for the most part, I'm just here to listen to everyone and the recommendations.
Yeah. And lastly, I think I want to say, I think we've gone through, because we've had Rick is our second planner. We had a first planner, and obviously before Courtney came on, we had someone previously Dave Crawford, who was a previous biologist. So we originally went through that process. We had an approval through biology, and then we went through it again. So we've gone through probably, I think, a total of almost 7 iterations back and forth to mitigate all the codes that we're up against for this project. So again, not having to remove any oak trees on this lot. There's an existing driveway we're just keeping in place, where there's an oak tree kind of adjacent, and then over on the other far corner, which Rick had mentioned. So we had to basically shrink the length of our pool to just meet the strict codes on that. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say regarding the ESHA buffers and whatnot. But if anyone has any questions for us, we're here.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Gail, I'm sorry to ask you this. I'm not seeing anybody from the public. Is that correct? I just wanted to make sure we don't need to open it up to public comment.
I do not see anyone outside of the applicants.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so we are going to open it up to ERB. We have another project after this, which is next door. So whatever comments you guys have, let's try and keep it to 3870 Puerco Canyon. I understand that they're neighboring properties, but let's try and keep our comments really clear for the record. Okay, so Noah, let's start with you.
Okay. Quick question about the clarity between the two projects. Is it different applicants or the same applicant?
Same applicant.
Okay. So it's kind of one big project in that way.
Well, we have to treat them separately. You know, they are 2 separate applications. It is the same applicant, but yes, we look at each one, you know, essentially in a vacuum, based on you know the differing conditions for each property. But obviously, yes, there is some overlap when it comes to the trees impacting you know, one site from another.
Yeah. Next question that I have is on the project ending in 70. Which is the one we're talking about right now. So I noticed that the actual structure of the house is positioned at a setback from the road, with the pool and decking and all of that landscaping being positioned closer to the road. That sets the actual house structure closer to the stream and puts the fuel modification buffer for Zone B right up against the stream. Is there an alternative where that can be flipped, where the house is situated closer to the road? And I understand that there's a minimum setback requirement, but you know, we have to weigh those things against each other. Where the house structure can be situated closer to the edge of the road, and the pool and decking situated on the canyon side, which the pool and decking would not have a fuel modification buffer. And so that would pull the Zone B buffer back away from the stream somewhat.
So to quickly answer that, the fuel modification buffers, all of them basically impact the entire site. So
yes, but there's a big difference in impact between B and C.
Right. Let's could we have up the fuel modification zones, please? It was slide 6 again. Okay, so we have zone B here. So you're saying then with the if you could repeat that for me, that would be very helpful.
Yes, so you can see very well on this slide. You can see where the stream is going
Yep.
through there. And the stream pretty much falls right along the edge of Zone B.
Mm-hmm.
So the impacts from the fuel modification required for Zone B go right up to the edge of the stream. And as we know, streams do tend to meander, so possibly even into the stream, right?
Yep.
On the other side of the house, you can see there's quite a bit of area between the road and the edge of the house that's you know, pool, decking, landscaping, etc.
Mm-hmm.
If the house were to be situated back closer to the road, what is that, like 30 feet?
Yeah, so right now, let me look at the setback here. So they are proposing a reduced front yard setback. So it's through a minor modification. So they're proposing a 50% reduction, which takes that down to 32.5 feet. So if a further reduction to that setback would be proposed, that would basically result in a request for a variance for that reduction if the home were to move essentially further south is the direction.
Yes. So yeah, that would be my recommendation, to propose a variance to bring the house closer to the edge of the road, instead of having the fuel modification zone going out toward the stream.
Okay.
So put the
Yeah,
setback the other way.
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation, maybe too complicated to answer just right here, right off the bat. So I think we could give the applicant time to visit that recommendation and see if it's feasible along with Rick. Like he said, it would require another variance. So I think that's a recommendation that I have written down, and certainly the applicant team can visit it should it be feasible. Chris, is there another thing that you'd like to add to that?
Well, yeah, I want to point out, because maybe Noah's not seeing, and hi, Noah, nice to meet you. There
Hello.
also is a fuel modification. So one of, obviously we're up against a lot of different code requirements. And as Rick mentioned, one would be an additional variance, but which you would recommend. But then you can also notice the fire hammerhead turnaround in the driveway, which is also a requirement by fire prevention. So you can see that dotted in the pink line up there. And we're pulling the house almost
Sorry,
actually overlapping it.
could you point that out, please?
I don't know if I can, but maybe Rick, or you have ability. Do I have the ability to do that?
If I have the ability to share here, I could show that fire department turnaround. Okay, so
It was on that slide, Rick. If you want to just do that last slide, is the purple line.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we can go back to that one, or but probably even easier, I can show you on the plans here. Let me just go ahead. We can try and show this. Does that show up to everyone here, the subject property? And this is effectively the hammerhead turnaround here that Chris is referencing with the driveway. So, this is the Privet Road, which is essentially the flag lot driveway that accesses the property. And this dashed area here, this is the hammerhead turnaround required by the fire department for that.
Which Rick is also
see.
off of an existing driveway.
Correct.
Yes, correct. Yes. So this kind of shaded area here, the sort of stippled pattern there, that is an existing driveway, which the applicant would be effectively reusing, if you will, here with no additional development proposed to that. They would just basically be putting that or repurposing that existing driveway.
Yeah.
And
I don't see that really impacts what I'm recommending here, because directly in front of the driveway, and maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like more of like a shaded arbor or a shaded cover, like a porch cover. Then so most of the house is actually not in front of the driveway. So setting the house back closer to the road actually wouldn't affect that driveway. It would affect the position of the deck and the pool and the spa.
right, but let me address that note a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you actually notice where the footprint of the house goes, what you're recommending is probably more like 5 feet. We also have to show car parking on site as well there. Obviously, hammerhead has to be clear to sky, so we can't even overlap any of that. So yes, we could take off some solar shading elements. However, you see, we also jogged, if you would reference the shape of the stream and how that flows. So if you notice, our house actually, and also the canyon, or no, I shouldn't say the canyon, but the flat pad and the slopes also kind of mirror similar to what's going on on the stream. So our building kind of jogs to that, and it's set, and effectively our building comes forward to allow for the driveway, the 2 parking required by planning, the hammerhead required by fire prevention on the left-hand side. And then over on the right-hand side, the house kind of jogs back. So it does come forward to the left as you were recommending. And we're only talking about literally 5 foot more we could do over there. And then on the right, it does step back, because then if you look at the site plan, the stream kind of flows back. It kind of cuts, see how it kind of cuts back? That's that dash line in the back. And so
Yes.
the house loosely kind of follows that. We did, so your recommendation is taking the house forward and putting all the amenities, the pool and everything in the backyard, and having the house right up against the street. The whole reason why the city has front yard setbacks is because they try to give relief from the street, so you don't see big walls of houses like right up on the street. You know, the codes, obviously, as we all know, are extremely strict. They're set up to basically keep a very rural and natural look in Malibu. And the setbacks are rather large in relation to almost every jurisdiction that we've worked in, and most jurisdictions that we're familiar with. So again, bringing the house just brings a bigger wall of house towards the street, which is kind of not the point of the code. And that's why, I mean, we have to ask for a 50% reduction, which we're allowed, but anything beyond that, it requires a variance for that reason. Now you can see how big of a lot we have. Over almost 3/4 of it is in Esha, with the oak trees and whatnot. So I think we've done a pretty, the house is relatively narrow. It's thin. We laid it all out in a linear line. And I think we've done a pretty good job of basically taking that square footage along that line. And keep in mind that this house is quite a bit larger than than most of the big mansions in the neighborhood right across the street and whatnot. So we're not going out to the maximum limit of 11,000 feet like a lot of people do in Malibu. So it's a rather small house. But back to your point of putting those amenities in the back, I mean, we did jog the house back a little further. And you can see that little dotted line in the back. That is a small little buffer line right there. We are outside. The corner of our house is outside of that. Obviously the 5 foot walk around from fire prevention, which is required, encroaches into that just a wee bit, but that's a requirement. So we did consider this when you remember we submitted this house. Well, Woolsey Fire was it'll be 6 years ago in November. So here we are on almost 6 years since this house burnt down, and we've been in the city planning for years and years and years working with. So I appreciate your recommendation, and it's very thoughtful, and I understand you not having to go through this whole process, why you would come up with that. And maybe if we had this ERB in the very beginning, we could have had a more in-depth discussion. But at this point, we've gone back and forth with the city 7 different rounds, and we've considered all of that. And if you look, our front deck is really kind of thin and narrow. The pool is kind of stretched out. It's snugged up, as tight to the development as possible. And also the big thing in Malibu, the codes, not only are the codes set up to protect nature, but they're also to protect private views. I know that's, from a coastal standpoint, we're protecting the oak trees and the flora and the fauna, of course. So that's one major consideration. But as we all know, private ownership rights in Malibu is all about the ocean view. That's why everyone loves to be out there. So I know this is not necessarily ERB's consideration, but I do want to bring up giving a little bit of outdoor area, which is why people love Malibu, to be outside in the front of the house so they can see the ocean. That is a real genuine consideration. And of course, it doesn't necessarily address your point, but also part of the
Chris,
site plan.
I'm sorry, Chris,
Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
gonna have
Go
to
ahead.
cut you off
All
for a
right, that's
second.
fine. Go ahead.
So
More
Noah, does
questions.
any of this rescind your recommendation?
I'd like to say that I really appreciate the amount of thought and effort that has gone into planning this home and the landscape and the construction. And I do appreciate your points about, the house following the setback of the stream. And view sheds are important. I don't know that necessarily you have a good view of the ocean from that pool, because I think you have a good view of the house across the street from that pool. But I do appreciate all the points that you made, and I know the planning process is long and arduous and a lot has gone into this. However, at the ARB, we only get to see this now, as you said, so I can only make my comments based on what I'm seeing in front of me. And so I maintain my recommendation of exploring setting back the home further towards the street, in any way that can be done, in order to protect the habitat in front. And I have a additional comment,
Sure.
and this kind of applies to both properties, but I'll say it now and then I'll say it again when we get to the other property. So the homes are situated sort of at the top of a slope. It's kind of like a almost a secondary canyon that branches off the main canyon. And so fire hazard wise, it's in a really high fire hazard area. It's a very heavily vegetated slope. It has a lot of really good important species that are growing there, that have grown back since the Woolsey fire. Also a lot of invasive species that, could potentially be removed. The other house, there was a mention that the fuel modification area was reduced based on the home hardening aspects of the house structure. I didn't see that for this home. I would recommend that, this home follows whatever it is that got that home the fuel modification reduction, even though I'll comment when we get back to that one. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of mixing the two, but those are, the requirements are going to be less, but that doesn't mean necessarily that the action is going to be less, but that would help reduce the impacts to the Esh and to the stream. I don't know if that makes sense. Does it make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. So you're
Okay.
recommending that this home follows the neighboring home in their fuel modification reduction from home, as a result from home hardening.
Yes.
I understand. So you recommend that the applicant pursue that, and if they're allowed to.
Yes.
Okay.
And then last comment I'll make is that there's a lot of invasive species, including Euphorbia terracina and Pride of Madeira, that are growing along those slopes, and those are a fire hazard and increasing the risk along that slope. I'd recommend those be removed. And then for the walnuts, because there's a lot of resprouting walnuts that are kind of shrubby in appearance right now, but will eventually grow back into being, actual trees, that those aren't trimmed back now because they're not full size trees now, but left to develop. So those are that concludes my recommendations.
Okay. I have gotten them down. Recommend that the applicant remove invasive species along the slope, and recommend that the applicant not trim the walnut saplings back, and that they're left to grow further.
Yes.
Okay. So sorry, Chris, the only reason that I cut you off is because all of the things that you were saying to Noah, you can put in your response, whether the recommendations are feasible or not. So it doesn't necessarily need to happen right here during this meeting. You'll get a chance to do that when you see the recommendations fully fleshed out in a report. So
Okay.
yeah, so if you guys have specific comments, I saw Jensen and Roberto, it's not necessarily a time for rebuttal, but if you guys have comments on that, what Noah just recommended.
From my side, I just wanted to point out, in case that is being foreseen, that bringing the house towards the street will also make us encroach into 3-to-1 slopes and bringing it closer to those mature oak trees. So if the fire is a concern, it will bring the house even closer to those mature trees. It will be basically over the house.
Thank you. Yeah, and then Jensen, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to comment too much on these things, but given, something of that nature where the house would be recommended to move, I just know the difficulties that that causes just because of how many iterations we've had back and forth between every consultant and the city and whatnot. And, you know, Chris, I think, put forth what he thought, and Roberto just gave his insight. The other thing I'd say is, you know, by pushing the house forward, my understanding is that for the Hammerhead turnaround, one issue we had is making sure that the slope was proper, and that also we weren't impacting the lower trees, the oak trees. So if naturally, if you bring the house more forward, my understanding is that the slope of the Hammerhead for the fire department would potentially have to increase to make up for that. And we're already kind of on the cusp of that in general. So I would just say that, you know, I absolutely appreciate the recommendation, and I understand it. We've scrutinized the project in such detail and really did weigh all the alternatives. So by doing that, it raises a lot of complications with all the consultants. It's most likely potentially not even passable with slopes and the encroachments in the trees, which would further impact the site. I just wanted to bring that up because you know, things of that nature, especially something that would require a variance, which is discretionary, it adds such a complexity to the project that's already been a highly complex project, that it would be opening us up to in essence an additional discretionary approval with things that more than likely wouldn't work. So I don't know how this works with the ERB. This is my first time going through this, but obviously I know that if things are put forth on the agenda or however the notes that you take, it just requires a lot of time and energy. So I would just, you know, I know we have another project to go to and probably more items to discuss on this one, but it would just be appreciated if it would be considered while we're doing that to take that into account, and if that could be potentially a rescinded recommendation. But I understand that we have more things to go through, and I just ask that it's thought about before it's solidified.
Okay, so I will ask Noah one more time if she's gonna rescind her recommendation, and then we're gonna move on to the next ERB member.
Okay.
I'm not rescinding my recommendation. However, it is legally just a recommendation, and that recommendation goes forward to the next section. And so they don't necessarily have to incorporate all of our recommendations.
And Noah is 100% correct. Jensen and Christopher, you guys will have an opportunity to say whether or not this is feasible. So please, you know, do that at this time. Again, this isn't a time for rebuttal. So we're going to move on to the next ERB member. Jensen and Chris, maybe put your hands down for now until after Clark. So Clark, go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good morning. Let's see. I'll just turn my video on for a moment and then I'll say hello and goodbye because bandwidth, having some connectivity issues. So I think this is, you know, Noah raises an important issue here that when we at the ERB, I'm an architect, and I understand what goes into this to get a well-designed project and well-presented, well-coordinated project to this point. So sensitivity to that for sure. And, you know, one of the things that's a little difficult here is that because of the time gone by, we're not looking at the pre-existing impacts, which of course, after several years, we've got a completely new, in some ways, completely new landscape, right? Transformed landscape, not just from the fire, but from recovery. So when we think about environmental impacts, right, there's in these burned areas where homes were lost, there is, you know, a consciousness of that, and yet the reality is today's reality, right? When we look at what's there. So I have a couple of questions related to the study. I could not tell if the biological study I'm talking about, biological report, if there were any, I believe, as Noah mentioned, there are undersized, I guess, sublegal walnuts in the area that are coming back post-fire that perhaps are sublegal size. I couldn't find whether there were or were not any oak tree regrowth in the area. And this goes to mitigation because I would want to protect that. I think sadly the Woolsey fire proved that houses burn from the inside out. An oak woodland on a north slope is, I believe, one of the best zone 1 habitats you can have. Zone 0, even in my opinion. The fire department might disagree with me. So that should be, it breaks up the wind, it slows the movement. And if your oak woodland is healthy, you can't set it on fire from the air with an ember. So you really have to just deal with the understory at the leading edge, the upwind edge or downhill edge of that oak. So in the mitigation, as Noah mentioned, restoring the understory to what should be in association with an oak walnut woodland is a good idea. And I also agree that very careful treatment and pruning of anything that's regrowing that is undersized now to increase the density of that woodland, I think would be again, we're not commenting on fire, but it's something we work in my organization. So I think that they go together, right? A healthy oak woodland, walnut woodland, and that goes together. Now, the big issue here, I think, is just one that I really don't know. And so this is kind of a question for staff. I understand that the house, and I guess I'd make air quotes here, could be bigger, right? Subject to regulations. It has been reduced. I also encourage, to the extent that a house project's being proposed, that it's long and skinny in the right direction. Also, from a design perspective, every room gets a view of the ocean here, so it's not like it was a big sacrifice to make this long and skinny facing the ocean. However, it also has side yard reductions, which I want to point out. If that gains setback from, as it does in this case, a sensitive resource, that's a good thing too, right? Because you're encroaching into an existing setback area and fuel modification area. So that's all good. The elephant in the room here is, just to be extreme, it's like an 800 square foot house would have less impact than an 8,000. And I don't recall what, we see the development footprint proposed, I believe, was 10,000 on this project. I may be confusing the two. But I mean, that's what it comes down to is, we can't move the house. We can't reconfigure the house, in part because it's the size it is. And at this point, I'm not recommending that happen. I'm recommending, to be clear here, that the mitigation focus on restoring native oak walnut woodland and protecting any undersize of trees of that species or any native species in that restoration to be to the greatest extent possible, because I think it is a good fire defensible buffer, this kind of habitat. And I guess that's where I would leave it. I don't know that it's appropriate to say what, I'm not, by the way, that wasn't a recommendation, make it 800 square feet. It was just more for staff, I guess, about like how in the early stages is that addressed, right? If this was even skinnier, right, it could be closer to the street without encroaching on those slopes, but it'd be smaller. Can someone answer that for me? How that's handled?
So I can let Rick answer that, but like the planning process, if Rick would like to address that, he can, but I think the planning process in ERB maybe, you can certainly ask us that, maybe as an aside, but Rick, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah. So, with regard to the overall square footage, so the applicant did provide, as part of their analysis for the site plan review, kind of an overview of just the surrounding areas. So I have some of that analysis handy right now. So within 1,000 square feet, or sorry, 1,000 foot radius of the subject property. So the vast majority of those homes are all over 4,000 square feet. So the proposed development is about 6,800 square feet. So approximately 28% of the homes in that 1,000-foot radius are between 6,000 and 7,000. More interestingly, 64% of the homes in that radius are over 7,000 square feet. So, you know, the applicant has tried to justify their proposed square footage of the home based upon the surrounding area.
Thank you for that, Rick. I know we're trying to move on, so you answered my question. So there's a contextual analysis that went into this that says, you know, we're average to above average, but not the biggest. We're not the smallest, and yeah. Okay, well, I think that you know, understanding that and the value of these places, and that, you know, there is always pressure to well, I'll leave it at that. My recommendations are that the mitigations focus on maintaining and really working with the fire department carefully, because the fire department is in LA County is sophisticated this level, right? There are foresters involved, which is a funny term, but they're really people who understand habitat. And so I think they'll work with you on these near zones. And yeah, I would love to see the mitigation include an immaculate restoration of all the zones to native material, because that would leave the site better than you found it. And that would be a good outcome.
Okay, great, Clark. I have those written down as your recommendations. Thank you so much. Other ERB members, I can pick on you or you can raise your hands. Patrick, Marnie, Jennifer. Okay, Patrick.
Yeah, before I make any comment, our office is working with the property owner on other projects, so I'm not sure if that qualifies as a conflict of interest.
I believe Tyler is in the meeting. Tyler, does that constitute as a conflict of interest? Do you know? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Sorry, Tyler.
Actually, Patricia's here. She would know better.
Oh,
This is
Patricia.
not, as everyone said, this is not a approving body. You guys do not make decisions. So I think it may be okay, but let's check with Patricia.
Okay, because yeah, it just kind of feels like it does personally. So I don't necessarily have any comments based on the information that's been provided in the thorough comments that have been provided by others, but just for the sake of transparency, wanted to throw that out there.
Hi, Patrick. This is Patricia. Can you repeat what you believe might be a conflict of interest?
So we're working with the property owner on another project.
So I would say, since again, this is a recommending body, I think we just move forward with your recommendations at this point. So
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Thanks, Tyler. Really appreciate it, you guys.
So I'll keep my comments to civil grading and drainage items. And on that front, it was a little unclear what the anticipated drainage conveyance was for the project and how they're getting any storm runoff away from the building pad. I wasn't sure if anyone on the design team could elaborate or provide any insight on what was going on there.
Yeah, anybody? Rick or Chris or let's see.
Yeah, I'd be happy to pull up the civil, and then you know, maybe Chris, do you want to walk us through those plans? I think you're muted right now, by the way.
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, our civil engineer is not on the call right now, but yeah, if you want to pull those up, and I can.
Yeah, give me 1 second while I go through my folders here.
Yeah, I could have missed them in the set that we were provided, but for this particular lot, I didn't see any civil plans.
Yeah, I think just the architectural were provided in this case. So let me enlighten everyone. Give me 1 second while I pull up. Okay. do we want to focus on the grading, or do you say that more the drainage?
Yeah, it was more of a drainage.
Yeah.
At this point, curiosity without any real understanding of what's going on, but with the considerable steep slope on the backside, and I just wasn't sure what the design was there.
Yeah, is that a swale? This is Clark. I'm just wondering if that hashed area near where the roof drains are on the north side is a drainage.
Yeah, I see what you're seeing.
That looks like it's in the legend, it says existing wall, doesn't it? Number 9?
Yeah, that's an existing wall.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the retaining wall that was previously, related to the old home, and is ultimately being proposed to be retained. Stays just outside of the protected zone of tree 26 there, I believe.
So Chris, did you want to kind of break down the drainage quickly here for Patrick, or?
Yeah, I mean, the basic code of drainage, frankly, the code is always, take all the drainage to the street, because everything is all set up in the street to handle stormwater.
Right.
I always and you don't take it back behind the building, because that'll erode the slopes. So I personally always have a conflict of interest regarding the actual code, because it just seems natural to me to take all the water to the stream, right? Because if this pad was never graded, again, we're not grading any of the pad, we're using the existing graded pad. So we're not proposing any new grading outside of just the spoils for the excavation of the footings. But yeah, I mean, it's a very simple drainage plan. I mean, the code requires us to take all the roof drains, kind of collect, and we take it out into the front driveway, and then we take it out to the street, where the street is designed to basically handle the stormwater. So it's pretty simple and straightforward that way. As more of an environmentalist, when we were discussing this with the civil, I wanted to take all the water to the natural water course, which is the stream. But of course, then we'd be effectively, that's called development, putting a pipe down there and taking it into an ESHA and dropping the water back behind the house back into the stream. So the civil engineer said we'll never get that through code, and of course, we'd be up against putting more development in ESHA. So obviously we didn't propose that. So it's straightforward per code. All the stormwater is collected. You can see on the roofs, goes to the drains, and then in the driveway we have a collection box, and then it comes out. It comes out in the front of the driveway. So it's pretty, taking it all the way to the paved surface. Obviously in Malibu, with the foundations in geology and public works, the biggest concern is erosion to the hillsides. So we're always the code takes us, we want all the stormwater out into the street areas where public works has designed it to basically handle all stormwater. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, that was really great. Thank you. Patrick, what did that, any recommendations arise from that?
No, I can't really see the construction notes on this, but it sounds pretty straightforward. My primary, not concern's a strong word, but curiosity was just if they were discharging to that rear slope, but it sounds like that's not the case, so I don't have any further comment.
Okay, and no formal recommendations at this time?
No. Sorry for the pause. I'm just looking at these.
Yeah. We move to the construction notes. I gotcha.
Yeah, I'm just looking.
Sure.
And this is kind of a question more for the city. I did see in some of the comments that they were requiring a WQMP for this project. Is that a typical requirement for a fire rebuild? That hasn't been my experience. I just wanted, it's kind of antithetical to the goal of the ERB, but at the same time, I want to require this project to do more than what would be required for a typical project for stormwater treatment purposes.
As a public works requirement, yeah.
Because I have seen for a lot of fire rebuilds, with some of the people who have been at in the public works department in the past, especially when the first the Woolsey fire actually happened, they weren't requiring WQMP at the time. So maybe that's just something I should follow up separately with Public Works on.
Yeah. So the difference here, Patrick, is that it's a CDP. It's not a PVWF. So it's not a rebuilding kind, and so they're probably looking at it as a new house.
Thank you. That clarifies that.
Thank you, Tyler. Really appreciate that. Clark, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, just a softscape, soft recommendation here based on Christopher's inclination. I think, Christopher, it would have been a problem probably to collect everything and make a point source discharge into the creek directly, but I would also recommend, based on your intuition, that you look at adjacent to the 5-foot path of travel for fire reduction. And that's why I was kind of drawn to the hashed thing there. If you think of it, in the area immediately adjacent to the top of the slope, if you looked into the possibility of some amount of bioswale detaining or retaining, I don't have the geology there, but as you develop your native scaping approach, because I did hear it's all going to be natural, right from the 5 feet out. Natural could include a soil moisture zone. You have to be carefully designed so you don't load that slope, but just look at a bioswale, some kind of bioswale development that would overflow back towards the street so that you could move adjacent to that. I don't know if the topography would allow this or not, but you might be able to take some of that rainwater capture that would normally have been, filtering into the ground and feeding those oaks to possibly infiltrate some of that roof runoff. Again, this would be a design process you'd have to go through carefully. But so there's not too much or too little, right? You don't create the erosion, but that high soil moisture area is an additional fire buffer element that we're looking at increasingly beyond the zone 0, where you're looking for nothing combustible. That high soil moisture translates to basically another ember catching and extinguishing zone. So, and if you can do that with roof water captured, stored, and deployed at key times, right, in those like red flag conditions or later in the year. So rainwater storage, capture, and reuse in a kind of bioswale element adjacent to the oak woodland might be something to look at.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, I like that idea, and that's something that I would like to continue to discuss with Public Works and with geology. Every time I go down this path with the civil engineers, Public Works, and geology, I usually get a big brick wall in the face, meaning like, yeah, it's a
don't forget vector control, right? No, that's
yeah.
fun, right? But
yeah.
again,
So,
I think it's worth pursuing.
No, I think it's a really great idea. It's a great discussion because naturally, before this was cut, I imagine this was much higher, and then the water went back to the stream. I mean, that's where all the natural watershed goes, into to the stream. So it makes a lot of sense. Now the difference is, in nature, the erosion is a very real thing. Where in our built world, our codes in geology, geotechnical, Public Works, and vector control and fire prevention, everyone gets involved. And everyone's some codes make a lot of sense. Other codes combined together don't necessarily make sense. And so I'm always fighting that battle of trying to do what nature does. And then I always get the pushback saying, hey, listen, the code doesn't allow it. That makes a lot of sense. And then of course, because of the ESHA, we're putting a cistern, even putting another development tank somewhere to retain.
Christopher, we could continue offline if you'd like, but it is a discretionary permit process, so everything's kind of negotiated, right? So
right.
Anyway, it's just there for you guys to consider in the future, and that concludes my comments, I promise.
It's a very good point. Thanks, Clark, for bringing that up. I like the way you're thinking.
Okay, I saw Patrick's hand go up and then go down, so we will.
Right.
Okay, move on to either Marnie or Jennifer. Jennifer?
Sorry, I think the only comment, I really applaud Clark's comment about ensuring that the mitigation is taken care of and the understory. You know, and this isn't a recommendation, but echoing back or piggybacking back to what Noah was saying about just the basic square footage of these homes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Jennifer, but there's some sort of background squeaking noise. Can everybody mute themselves, please, in case that might be the problem?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's causing that.
Is it resolved?
It's something to do with your microphone, I think.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I don't know how to fix that. Is it still?
You're muted, Courtney.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, maybe try and give your recommendation. It's just hard to hear you. That's why I kind of like went like this towards my speaker.
Got it, okay.
And then maybe for the next one, you can call in, like once we move on to the next project, you can call in and maybe be on your phone or something like that.
Okay, yeah, I don't know why that would be the case, but you know, my only recommendation is just to look at the use of bird safe glass once again on these homes that are surrounded by woodland to protect the potential coopers or whatever else is nesting in the area.
I gotcha. Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. Sorry about that feedback. Yeah, again, you can try calling in and see if that helps. It may not. But I received your recommendation. I heard you, so perfect. And then Marnie.
Yeah, hi, Courtney. Everyone seems to have covered everything I've thought of as usual, but just one thing I was wondering about. There is an existing residence to the east, and they would have a brush clearance zone that would cover a portion of this property. And I wonder if that's been mapped to show where that would fall. Because if this property remains vacant, the owner of this property will be required to provide brush clearance to protect that home to the east.
I don't know. Rick, do you recall if this is in the biological assessment? Because I'm fairly certain that would be the only place that it would be at.
Is that a new house to the east? Was that a fire rebuild? Or did that make it through the fire?
It's my understanding that home made it through the fire. But yeah, I don't believe that it was part of the biological resources assessment either.
Okay. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
Well, you just might want to look at that. So the management of the existing native vegetation, the proposals that have been put forth sound very good and interesting. But I just want to point out, in the past, when we've looked at impacts of fuel mod zones, we have often taken into account brush clearance zones that already exist, because actually it would, whatever they will be doing to protect their home as far as removing non-natives and doing anything they can do to increase the value of the habitat will be a benefit that wouldn't exist if the property stays vacant, because then they would be required to do brush clearance for the adjacent house.
I see what you're saying, Marnie. Okay, so recommend that the applicant look at the existing management of vegetation by the home to the east that currently has existing fuel mod zones.
Well, I'm just saying that brush clearance would normally apply to a vacant property. It's just that there will be actually a benefit to that habitat.
Right. So is there?
When they incorporate their specific fuel mod plan, because that will address that issue without making it necessary to do additional removals.
Right. I
Of the
understand.
understory. Yeah.
So did you want the applicant to, is there a recommendation for the applicant? Like,
no, there's no
okay.
recommendation. It's just information. I think it's important for us to know where there are brush clearance zones that already exist, because once those properties are developed and if the fuel mod is carefully managed, it's actually can be beneficial.
Right. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's a good point. So no, I just want to make sure, no formal recommendations at this time?
No.
Okay, okay, I just want to make sure, I didn't want to get it wrong, okay.
Okay,
Okay. All right, thank you so much.
you're welcome.
If there are no other comments on this specific property, we will move on to 3868 Puerto Canyon Road. I just will give that a moment to ruminate and then I will. Okay, I will introduce. We are putting forth CDP permit number 21-042. Contract planner Rick Caswell will provide the presentation for this project at 3868 Puerto Canyon Road.
Thank you again, Courtney. For this second item, we're reviewing another two-story single-family residence plus basement with associated development at 3868 Puerto Canyon Road. If I could have the next slide, please. So the property has not been previously developed other than minor landscape improvements associated with the previous home at 3870. So the same Escher and protected tree species found at 3870 are also evident on the property here at 3868. As with 3870, the proposed development, including required fuel mod, will result in impacts to the 100-foot buffers from both stream and woodland Escher. If I could have the next slide, please. So very quickly, I'll just go through the scope of work here. So the applicant's proposing a approximately 4,500 square foot, two-story single-family residence with almost a 2,000 square foot basement and 720 square foot subterranean garage, pool and spa, on-site wastewater treatment system, and associated development. There would be, of course, a variance required for the fuel mod and proposed development encroachment into Escher and Escher buffer, as well as a variance for setback reductions to both the rear and south side yard. Further, there is a site plan review for construction above 18 feet up to 28 feet in height for a pitched roof. If I could have the next slide, please. So just looking here at some of the proposed impacts here, this was taken from the biological resources assessment. You can see the development area shown in the orange kind of hatched pattern there. And you'll notice that trees 20 and 21 there are both impacted by that development area. Those are being proposed to be removed to accommodate the proposed development. But again, as with the other property at 3870, the applicant is proposing the project here really in sort of the most appropriate location possible. It's the flat portion of the lot here at the south, of course, avoiding development being proposed to the north there, where that woodland Escher exists and a number of other protected trees. If I could have the next slide, please. So just looking at the protected trees here, so you can see in the purple color here, you've got potential replacement tree planting locations shown, as well as obviously some protective fencing around some of the trees there that are going to be essentially right on the cusp there of the development area. So you can see trees 12, 11, and 22 there, which would require the protected fencing just given their proximity to the development area. But again, just pointing out that the development area does avoid encroachment into the protected zones of those trees. It's just trees 20 and 21 that in this case are the sacrificial lambs. If I could have the next slide, please. Again, looking at the fuel modification zones here, you can see zone C, the furthest one out there, 100 to 200 square feet, or 100 to 200 feet, linear feet, sorry. And shown in green here is the 30 to 100 foot zone. And then, of course, the 0 to 30-foot zone in the yellow there, which I'm sure we'll probably want to come back to as we discuss further in the project here. If I could have the next slide, please. So a quick summary of the impacts here. So the entire development area does fall within that 100-foot buffer from woodland Escher. There's no avoiding that. Wherever they were to locate the development, it would be impacting that particular Escher buffer. So we have about 1,500 square feet of permanent impacts to woodland Escher would result from the proposed development. Fuel mod zones A and B would impact about 13,500 square feet of woodland Escher, while fuel mod zone C would impact almost 13,000 square feet of woodland Escher, as well as about 436 square feet of impacts to stream Escher. As mentioned before, oak trees 20 and 21 are being proposed to be removed in order to accommodate the proposed residents. Quick note as well, so per the biological resources assessment, that did include the native tree survey report, and that identified the same with 3870, 23 native protected trees, which include coast live oaks and black walnuts. And as mentioned, of those trees, 2 are being proposed to be removed, and those are both oak trees, in this case, coast live oaks. Encroachment of a native tree, as defined by the LOP, as mentioned before, is encroachment within the drip line of the tree and extending at least 5 feet beyond the drip line, or 15 feet from the trunk of the tree, whichever is greater. So, the LIP, if we can have the next slide, please. Also noting here, and for purposes of efficiency, I won't read through all of these applicable sections of the LIP. It's the same ones that previously applied. I'll just try and hit a few points here. So the applicant is, of course, subject to the development area limitations given the Escher encroachment. So they're typically allowed a 10,000 square foot development area. They're proposing just under that at 9,992.72. So just squeaking in there. Notably, of course, tree replacement planning program was provided. Mitigation options, of course, are habitat restoration, habitat conservation, and in lieu fees for habitat conservation. And of course, there's the tree replanting ratio of 10 trees per 1 tree removed, where encroachment into the protected zone would result in either impacts to that tree, worsening impacts to the tree, or removal. Alternative mitigation, of course, is the in lieu fee or off-site planting. That about wraps it up. I'm, of course, available for questions, as is the applicant, and I'll hand back over to Courtney.
Thank you again, Rick. Let's see. So I have another 15 minutes for you, applicant. Should you need it, Chris or Jensen or Roberto?
Christopher, you are muted.
Yeah, I'm happy to make a few points. Rick, do you mind pulling up the site plan?
Yes, yeah, the formal architectural set.
Yeah, or the Escher map, either one, it's fine.
Okay, yeah, let's I guess go back to the slide if possible.
The fuel mod or the site plan, whatever. Maybe the site plan, if you have the site plan handy, that might be best, the architectural.
Yeah, the architectural would be, my questions will pertain to that, so I'd suggest the site plan.
Yeah, not a problem. Give me 1 second while I get that up before us here. So, let's see.
So while you're doing that, if you don't mind, I'll just start speaking. One thing people might notice that the stream actually turns north on this lot. Although it's a similar lot, we have a huge watershed behind us that drains into this stream that's in question. And similar to the other lot, a lot of the similar comments. However, this lot is a bit smaller. I mean, I should say the pad is a bit smaller. We were much more constrained. There is an existing, to the left, there's an existing road easement. And to the best of, the one thing also to mention is there are a lot of easements on these lots. This is a big road easement, and we tried to look, to contact the owner of this easement, and to no avail. I mean, this is something that's left over from the 70s. But obviously we have to set back from this. So we're really tightly constrained in this lot. So this house is smaller. The footprint is smaller. It is a 2-story house as well. We did go down in the basement just to because of the constraints and to keep it really tight. Regarding the oak trees, I mean, when we started laying out this project, we were very sensitive to both the oak trees. However, one of the oak trees is smack dab in the middle of the property. One thing as a side note to note, we do have another project that our client may be, and I've discussed this with the owner, may be helping us. We're going to relocate one of these oak trees offsite because the access is easy, and although the code requires us to remove both of these, and so obviously we have to replenish them with 10 or more, or we have the choice to pay the anew fees. But we love the oak trees. This one particular one, we had considered trying to do some sort of wraparound house around it and kind of keeping it in the center. But unfortunately, with the buffer zones wouldn't even allow us to do that. So from the planning standpoint and the strict codes, we have to actually say we're removing them, but actually oak tree number 20, which is in the back of a deck here. So technically, in theory and in application, we're saying that we're removing it. But I believe, and I'm very familiar with oak trees and trimming. I know they're very sensitive. I just wound up working with the oak tree on my property. I just planted 5. I love them. So our plan is to actually trim this one up. And if you notice our basement, our foundation above, we give a really sizable buffer for the, you can see the dashed line right there at number 21. It dashes around, that's the footing. And we basically cantilever the structure over this oak tree number 22. And it's basically a floating deck, a wood, a floating non-combustible, so we're using a non-combustible material, not wood, but we're doing a deck over this area, and the idea is that the tree can come up through. However, the code requires us on the application to remove it. So of course, we're saying that we're removing it, but we have all the intention in the world to basically excavate for our foundation in this area in such a way that it protects this portion of the roots that we're going to be impacting. And you can see we're almost out of the drip line on this side, not quite. On the back side, in the big, probably, almost 3/4 of the tree canopy is outside and is going to be hovering over our development. And then of course, that's why staff can't recommend that we keep it. So we actually have to say that we're removing it, but I just want to make that point very clear. Oak tree number 22, which we're not removing, we are keeping. We had to mitigate the pool, and so we basically tucked the pool way back far away from it. There was a bunch of back and forth with staff to get to that tree so that there's nothing encroaching into that 5-foot buffer and drip line area, or the drip line and then 5-foot buffer beyond the drip line area. Tree 21, no, tree 21 does have to get removed, unfortunately, but we are planning on relocating that as opposed to just chopping it down. And again, we have another potential home for that tree. And then of course you saw in the biology report that Rick showed the area that our biologist recommends planting the other oaks. And then of course the client also has the option to do the anew fees if he so chooses. And then a lot of the same arguments for this one are similar to the other one. We're constrained by a tighter land here. So, you know, in the front, we have to have our septic system, which is partially in the driveway and the walkway up to the house, reduce, you know, the reduced setbacks. So a lot of the same discussions, just a tightly constrained land. Obviously, you see we have a very large lot, and some nice acreage in the back, which is all up the slope. And, you know, our entire development is constrained to this tight, you know, for the most part, all existing graded pad that the previous owner of the fire burnout used to use as a big roundabout driveway. So I know we said it wasn't previously developed, but there was a big roundabout driveway they used to drive around the oak tree. So that's how they used to use it. There's pilasters in the front that are existing to this day. And of course, just to mention the point Rick had already made on the other house, and I know he'll probably make it again, that you know, because this is an adjacent neighbor, right across the street is a huge house that just finished construction, and then he gave all the percentages of the houses over 7,000 square foot, which are a lot, and then houses that are 4,000 and above, which are quite a few as well. But most houses in the area are quite a bit bigger than the house that we're actually proposing. I think that was the main thing I wanted to bring up. But again, our sensitivity to those two oaks, we're saying that we have to remove them. We're very confident that that number 20 is we're probably going to be is going to survive, and we're going to be able to keep it. But in number 20, we're planning on relocating, but I know the city doesn't, the code doesn't allow us to relocate them. We just have to replant 10 more or pay the in lieu fees. So that's all I want to see. Jensen, did I miss anything, or is there anything else you wanted me to say or add to this?
No, I think that's good. Thanks. Yeah, the only thing I would add, which I think you guys will see as we keep talking about it, is you know, given the easement on the left side and the oak trees on the right and the setback requirements, you kind of see almost this I don't even know what shape that would be considered. We're kind of like bows in and then out. So that, you know, we tried to do anything we could to avoid the oak trees in the original plan of the development and the back and forth with the city. But the reality is it'd be such an odd shaped and tiny part of the land that you could do anything with. So to mitigate, you know, our need to go into other oak trees, or we just tried to basically go more vertical, right? So we're still at the same height as the other property, but we decided to go down into a basement to try to basically minimize the footprint. And yeah, just like the other property, a lot of thought went into this, a lot of back and forth. At this point, 3.5 years, not including the due diligence we had with other architects and planners. So the reality is actually about 4 years so far has gone into both of these projects. And yeah, this one in particular, it's a huge lot, but heavily constrained by the trees and the easement. And I, you know, hope we design something that is great for the area.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate that. I am not seeing any public in the meeting yet.
There is someone here that was not
Oh.
here before that I'm not sure if they want to speak. I'm told they're not part of the applicant team. It's just Vitus, but he hasn't raised his hand, so.
So Vitus, from what I remember, is the landscape architect for this project, but
Okay, perfect.
yeah. Is that correct, Christopher Jensen? Or Vitus? Vitus, I see your hand raised.
Yes, Vitus is
Yeah.
landscape. Vitus, you want
I'm
to
just
speak?
here to answer. I'm just
Okay,
here to answer
great.
questions, but the landscape architecture, I mean, these are just clippings that I'm proposing to fill in little areas when construction is done. So I'm here to answer any questions about what it is that I proposed. But yeah, I'm just on board with Christopher on this thing.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Vitus. Clark, you can go ahead and begin.
Sure. Try and keep this brief. The proposed woodland mitigation areas appear to include dominant coastal sage areas. I know that there's non-native grassland mixed in there, but south and west facing slopes I don't think are appropriate for on-site oak woodland restoration. Typically, I don't expect success there. So that kind of backs into my recommendations here. Unlike the other, which had not just a horizontal development footprint, but it had a vertical one at one time. Someone lost their home there. This isn't, this did not have a residential development on it, right? It had graded areas and impacted areas, I understand, but there was no home here, in part because it is and was, I guess, when purchased, a very difficult small lot to work within. So my recommendation is that unlike the other, in this case, the owner look at extending the massing to the north and east, recognizing that actually moves the home towards the woodland area. In this case, the value of that connected oak woodland canopy is such that at the very least, tree 20, I would recommend reconfiguration of the footprint so that tree 20 can have less than a 30% encroachment. And I'd really like to encourage the owner to look at relocating massing and what was termed basement up into that northwest portion of the graded, I guess. It looks like it was previously graded pad area, and remove development from the current northeast footprint of the proposed residence. I do believe that in this case, a house within the range of the context that was shown is a small house. And that was a condition of the site. The oak trees existed, the easement existed. So I think working within those is my recommendation for this one.
Perfect. Okay, Clark. I have that all written down. Noah, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, I want to just go ahead and agree with Clark. I also noticed that the oak plantings are like way up above the riparian area in the grassland. And I do agree that that's not necessarily the best use of those oak replantings. Any of the areas that are down lower towards the stream, I think would be appropriate. I'll add to my recommendations here, similar to my other recommendations, removal of there's a lot of really good quality habitat here. There's also quite a bit of invasive species, including pride of Madeira. There's some castor bean, some tree tobacco, a lot of euphorbia. So I'd recommend that all be removed. I don't know that grassland restoration is necessarily an appropriate mitigation for oak tree removal, but because it's a different habitat type, but you have impaired grassland back there that could be greatly improved with removal of the invasive species and placement of native grassland species. So I don't know how that could be incorporated, but my recommendation would be to incorporate it as possible. And then also, this is kind of a chimney, which is why the homes burned down in Woolsey, because it is a chimney. The way that the canyon is structured, it funnels any flame right up to the homes. So removing a lot of that invasive understory would be very important. Maintaining the walnuts that are resprouting and not just cutting them down because they're not full-grown walnuts yet. We can be selective, and maybe selecting some suckers to keep. So maybe like 30% reduction of those walnuts for fuel modification. A mosaic would be appropriate, but not full removal of any of those walnuts that are crown sprouting. And then also there's a giant hedge of Cape honeysuckle that's really close to the house that, if not already slated to be removed, should be removed.
I'm getting all of these down. Okay, so I think I've got it all. Remove invasive species in the area and coincide that with a type of grassland mitigation for the required mitigation for the site, I believe. Recommend maintaining the walnuts and the oak saplings during fuel modification. and removal of the hedge of Cape honeysuckle. Did I miss something? No.
That's
What did I
it.
miss?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Chris, I saw your hand go up. Sorry if I missed it. Again, you will have an opportunity to address all of these recommendations. So, is there a comment that you have?
I just wanted to clarify, because I think Clark, and I understand what Clark's saying, because but he's on this site plan, we should have probably turned it off, but you're seeing a shadow. And Clark, you may be misunderstanding the
No,
shadow is
not miss it, Christopher. Sorry, with all due respect, not misunderstanding your shadow. Very nice drawings, by the way.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Well presented. I'm just saying, I believe in this case, the site that was purchased or acquired or part of, I don't know how it came about, but these are pre-existing conditions that I think can be worked around better than the current configuration to preserve the trees, at least tree 20. And I recommend being very creative. It's more of a north-south arrangement, L. It's a skinny L, but I think that if you could take your proposed strategy for 20, transfer it to 21 and keep 20 intact, you'd have roughly the same size home. Not that I believe that in this case, there's any obligation for the public to accept a house of a particular size. In this case, this is a small lot house. And so, yeah, just to be clear, I understand you have very good drawings, so it's very clear to understand and appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But just the backside where you're showing the L, because we did consider that, and that was because the slopes drop off like that. It's probably not really clear in this drawing.
Well, isn't that a scarp line I'm seeing, that dash line? Is that not a scarp line?
Let's see it. Now you can see a little better here. See that you can see it, the slope at the top there, it drops off. So it might be understood from that other drawing that that it's flat there, but we're going across the top of the top of the
Well, to your point, yes, I understand there's a slope there, and that would require vertical reconfiguration potentially as well as horizontal. But that's where the gap in the oak woodland is.
Right.
And if changing it is preferable to just reducing the northeast altogether, that's the basis of my recommendation, was to say that I would prefer to see a similar amount of square footage reconfigured, as opposed to just saying the house is too big for the site, given the pre-existing environmental conditions that exist that we're asked to comment on for variance from code requirements, zoning code requirements, or planning code requirements.
I like your recommendation, and I just wanted to be clear that we did consider that, but unfortunately, the slopes just precluded us from going into that area any further. So that's why we kept it all up on the pre-graded flat pad. But I do like your recommendation. I mean, we did think about that as an architect to wrap it around, but it just, with all the codes, mainly slopes, and then citing the septic system.
I would prefer to see a slope variance to loss of a continuous oak woodland extension. So I understand everything you're saying, and I understand too that, but I just want to be clear that noted that the slopes are there and that this would require significant redesign. I just think in this case, for a place where there was not a home pre-existing, those conditions restrict your potential for size and location of the home. And yes, I understand that there's give and take, but in a discretionary permit process, the ERB, the environmental significance of avoiding slopes versus avoiding oak woodland, in my opinion, is the slopes are less of a consideration.
If I could add to exactly to what Clark just said, the LIP actually requires that. ESHA should be the least possible alternative in terms of variances. So if there is a possibility of other variances to be explored to make this feasible, those should be considered first before ESHA impacts.
Up to and including reduction of size of the home. I'm sorry, in this case, I just want to make sure that's clear that yes, other variances could be considered, and it is a difficult lot, but it's not a difficult lot that used to have a house on it. It's a difficult lot that has an oak woodland on it and has for some time, so.
Right.
Perfect,
well,
Chris. Roberto, we're gonna move on because I think Clark and Tyler both explained that pretty clearly.
Sorry, just wanted to mention that we did provide a supplemental planning report where it shows that the remaining space after we subtract the 3 protected zones is only 2,300 square feet. So keeping the tree number 20 will make us also reduce the house even further to accommodate the tree protected zone. So it's not just the trunk of the tree.
Okay.
And if you have it handy, you can probably pull it up and see the remaining pad space that we have.
Again, understood, and stipulate to that recommendation remains as given.
Perfect. Thanks, Clark. Thank you, Roberto. We're gonna move on. Patrick, Marnie, or Jennifer, any one of you guys have recommendations at this time?
I do not know.
Okay, no formal. Let's see.
Not now, no.
Not at this time. Okay,
No.
Marnie. Okay, and then.
Or do I? I don't.
No. No? Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay, so no formal recommendations from Patrick, Marnie, or Jennifer. I believe we have been giving ERB members, until Friday, should they feel the need to provide recommendations. Oh, I see Noah's hand raised.
Hi, I just not a recommendation. I just wanted to show some appreciation for the project planners in the extents that they went to try to protect those trees. So I just want to recognize that. And then also I wanted to ask, do the recommendations that the ERB makes find their way into the planning of future projects? Like we're kind of making similar recommendations on multiple projects, and I'm wondering if that.
Right. Yeah. So every project is treated separately and in a vacuum, similar to what Rick said earlier. So my short answer would be no. No, the ERB recommendations are not then provided to future projects by either the planner or myself.
I think it would be possibly because a lot of the applicants have also said that some of our recommendations would have been great to have heard before they started designing. So if there is like a kind of a cumulative record of what our recommendations have been, if that could be provided to future applicants, just what kind of recommendations we've made on other projects, then they could use that to look at and say, oh, they'll probably say the same thing about our project, and we could take that into consideration in the design phase.
So
Hi, I'm
yeah.
sorry. This is Patricia Salzar. Hi, Noah. This is a great topic, I think, that we'll discuss under a future agenda, because I believe this has come up, and yeah, let's talk about it at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noah. I think that's a great recommendation.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the ERB members showing up today. Really appreciate the applicant team and Rick for presenting. Thank you, everybody. And I am not aware of an ERB meeting scheduled for the future at this time, so I don't have that announcement. But I believe this concludes the ERB meeting for July 24th, 2024.
Thanks,
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.